Welcome, Plainfield Mayor Adrian Mapp. It's great to see you and great to be with you.
Well, thank you, Max.
Sir, I just wanted to start, if we could, with your sense of how the COVID-19 crisis has impacted your town and your community.
Well, I must tell you that we have been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have had to adjust the way we do business in our city. I can tell you that our employees, for the most part, have been working remotely. We have modified schedules, so people are always in City Hall, and we've been able to continue to provide a high level of service to our residents that they have come to expect from us. So city government has not been shut down. We have remained open, servicing the people. However, in terms of the health impact, our city is a very diverse city, and we have segments of our population that live in very close quarters. And as a result of that, although we are a population of just about 51,000, we have had almost 6,000 positive cases of the virus, which resulted in, I believe, 166 deaths as of yesterday. And so it has impacted families greatly. It has affected the employment of our people. It has also created some hardships. And I don't have to tell you that food insecurity is a problem, not just in Plainfield and in New Jersey, but across the United States. And so we have had to provide assistance to people in many ways. Through our partnership with Union County, we have been able to have food distributions on an almost weekly basis to address that need of food insecurity. We have also been able to provide testing, not only through the testing site at Kane University, but we've had testing done in our city on an almost daily basis. We have brought testing to our residents here in the city to allow them to avail themselves of that need. Additionally, since the vaccine has arrived, fortunately, we have been able to have a vaccine site here in the city of Plainfield, where every Wednesday we provide shots in the arms of people. That is being expanded to Fridays, where the J&J vaccine will now be distributed at the Plainfield High School. We have created some funds, the Plainfield COVID-19 Relief Fund, which was geared towards providing financial assistance to our residents who are in need of such assistance. And we have helped numerous people in that regard. Additionally, we created a COVID-19 UEZ Relief Fund with an infusion of over $300,000 in funds, and we have distributed those funds an average of about $9,000 to close to 50 businesses across the city. So we have stepped in and have really been able to aggressively and effectively address the pandemic, address the crisis that was brought on to us. So I am very pleased. We've also brought ministers together because we know that that spiritual element is so important. And so we've had several live FaceTime events with our religious community, be it the imam, the rabbi, or the priest. We brought them all together to provide that spiritual nourishment to our community, as well as other FaceTime live updates where we kept the community informed and we invited questions from them so that we could provide responses. We've had sessions with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority where we were able to provide information to our businesses and residents in terms of how they could access grant funding and other resources. So we've had a very effective response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mayor, at the beginning of the millennium, the departure from Plainfield of Muhlenberg Hospital created the expectation of lack of services in a crisis, and how have you found that? Have you, now there's a real testing ground for the people of your city and the Central Jersey region without that hospital, and have they had adequate access to services?
I would say yes. There's no question that the departure of the Muhlenberg Hospital was a blow to the city, not only to the city, but to the neighboring communities that rely on Muhlenberg Hospital for well over 150 years. And so its departure led to a void in medical services to the community. Since its departure, there is still an emergency room there on the Muhlenberg campus, which was upgraded about 3 or so years ago. And so emergency medical services are still being provided there on site. The city was able to, through an RFP process, attract a developer known as CHA to repurpose the Muhlenberg campus into a residential as well as a medical mall. And so there are 120 residential market rate units there. And the facility is still under construction to bring a medical mall of 200,000 square feet of medical services that will come to that campus. And so I know that the developer is actively marketing those commercial spaces for the purpose of medical services. And so, yes, the departure created a void. We've been able to still have our people access medical services, although they now have to go outside of the city for the primary care that they once relied upon from that Muhlenberg Hospital. But I can't sit here and tell you that our residents are not receiving medical care. They are. They are going to the area hospital, such as Robert Wood Johnson, Overlook, Summit Medical, and so on and so forth. But we are still working very hard on making sure that the medical mall that will be at that former Muhlenberg campus will be able to provide some of those services, such as labs, such as doctor's offices, and different kinds of medical services to meet the needs.
Mayor, last month, Senators Menendez and Booker announced an expected, I think it's nearly $5 million to Plainfield from the federal American Rescue Plan. Is that in fact the correct amount as you understand it? And if it is, or if it is something close to that, do you have any expectation of how you might be able to use those funds locally?
Well, there still appears to be a great deal of uncertainty as to what the number really is. The initial information that we received through Senators Menendez and Booker's office was a spreadsheet that identified the allocation for cities across the entire United States. And in that file, it showed two columns. In one column, Plainfield was getting 9 point something million. In the other column, 11 point something million. Now, and that's what we are still expecting. Subsequent to that, there is another file that has been distributed that shows Plainfield getting $4.9 million. What we are not sure about, and we're still trying to get clarification on that sum of money that the city is to receive. We are not sure if that 4.9 million is half of the close to $10 million that was initially identified in the first spreadsheet that was disseminated across the United States, because we've been told that it will be given in two tranches. So is the 4.9 part one of two? we do not know. And we are still trying to get clarity on that. How will the money be used? It will be used to fill holes in our budget and to restore services that were cut, to restore revenues that declined markedly during the course of the pandemic. For example, parking revenues all but disappeared. And so there are revenue holes that were created as a result of the pandemic that will be plugged by those funds. And we will make sure that the residents of the city of Plainfield, homeowners, property owners, benefit from that infusion of cash that we're expecting to receive as a result of the American Rescue Plan.
The feds are also now debating the infrastructure plan that President Biden wants. And if that passes, what is your expectation for how that will impact Plainfield? What in the way of infrastructure might be improved by those monies?
That's a great question. And I must tell you that we have great expectations in terms of how we will benefit from the infrastructure plan. Since assuming this role of mayor back in 2014, we have been very intentional about what we do in the city. And so our infrastructure had been ignored for decades. Roads were in a state of disrepair. And in the last 5-6 years, we have paved 123 roads in the city, equating to 41 miles of roadways. And there's this gentleman who said to me, Mayor, I've been living here for over 60 years, and you have paved more roads in the last 5 years than were paved in the previous 55. So we want to continue rebuilding our infrastructure. There is a road, a state highway that passes through Plainfield.
Yes.
From the border with Fanwood to the border with Denellen. It's 4.7 miles, known as Route 28. Mm-hmm. The city does not have the resources to rebuild a state highway. Mm-hmm. And I have attempted over the course of the last several years to give that back to the state to whom it belongs. And so one of the things that came out of a meeting a year or so ago, the state said that it would cost about $30 million to upgrade all of the traffic lights and signals and to make the highway handicap accessible. And in order to do that, the tap is $30 million, which would need to be invested in that 4.7 miles of roadway, Route 28, that comes through the city of Plainfield before the state would take it back. And so we need $30 million, Max, right, in those infrastructure dollars to rebuild that state highway that comes through our city. And so this infrastructure bill is extremely important and critical. And we've been working very closely with Union County. We were on the phone with Bonnie Watson Coleman's office a couple of weeks ago, and we have submitted that as one of several projects for which we are seeking funding.
Mayor, is that a matter mostly of expanding the highway? Is it widening the highway? Is it just not an adequate artery given the population explosion in our area? What expressly is the problem with it as it exists?
The problem as it exists is that it's a very highly trafficked roadway, and many of the businesses on the western part of the city in particular, but not only on the western part, trucks come through. They use Route 28 as a means to get to Route 22, to get to Route 78. So it's a very highly trafficked area where lots of trucks, tractor trailers, use that roadway. And so it's a very important artery in terms of the economic viability of our city, our state. And so it is very key to commerce. And because Plainfield doesn't have the wherewithal to invest those kinds of dollars in this roadway that we really don't own, is owned by the state of New Jersey. We believe that we are entitled to receive infrastructure funding in order to repair, rebuild, and to make that roadway what it needs to be, because it's in a state of disrepair. But we can't take taxpayer dollars that are so desperately needed for all of the other things that we need to do in the city. Especially, I have pledged that I am going to rebuild, resurface every roadway in our city during my term of office, and we are well on our way to doing that. But we need help from the federal government as far as Route 28 is concerned.
Mayor, I want to talk a little bit about your $86.5 million budget, which passed, and you're not raising taxes this year, and the impacts of COVID in the COVID environment. You talked about lacking revenues from parking, for example, this year. Have you felt any significant losses of ratables through this period? I know you gained $1.2 million through the sale of property, but have you felt the evaporation of any dollars through businesses that have left the town, or ratables that have dried up in this period?
We have been impacted by declining ratables, which have resulted from people filing tax appeals. We know that that will all turn around as a result of the billion or so dollars of investment that the developers are making in our city. So the ratables will go back up over the next few years. But in the short term, the ratables have gone down, and that has impacted us. It's not businesses leaving, but it's because of tax appeals that have been filed by residents and businesses that have resulted in declining ratables, that makes it so much more important for us to get these dollars from the federal government. We have been able to hold the line of taxes as a result of really belt tightening austerity measures that we put in place, where we last year, out of sheer necessity and out of the concern for the health and well-being of our residents, we closed all of our parks. We put on pause our recreational programs because we thought that was the best thing to do in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
So we took those precautionary measures from a health perspective to protect our residents from the COVID-19 virus. And so we were able, through belt tightening, to deliver a budget last year, 2020, that was not only a no tax increase budget, Max, but it was a reduction in taxes 2020 over 2019. This year, in this year's budget, in spite of the hardships that we have faced and in spite of rising costs, we have been able to creatively do things to help our residents in this very difficult time that we are facing. We have put more of our fund balance, which people call surplus, into the budget in order to keep taxes stable. And not only have we been stabilizing taxes, but again, this year, 2021, we have reduced taxes. So for 2 consecutive years in a row, through very careful management of our budget, we have been able to hold the line on taxes and reduce taxes to our homeowners 2 years in a row, in spite of rising costs, in spite of revenues declining. We have been able still to do that. And our tax collection rate still remained very strong at 97 point something percent.
And you have an A1 Moody's rating.
A1 Moody's rating. So very good management across the board.
Mayor, Plainfield is not alone in receiving development that takes advantage of pilot programming that probably leaves some residents thinking that they're not paying their fair share. And to what extent do you think development in Plainfield leaves Plainfield residents with rising school costs, rising costs associated with sewer capacity? And do you see any way through these terribly challenging times to get businesses or developers that are moving into Plainfield to pay a greater burden, to relieve the burden from the taxpayers?
And they are paying a greater burden. Pilots are the only incentive, I must say, that there are 365 municipalities. There are 2 of them that are known as Class 1 cities that have taxing abilities, such as Newark and Jersey City, that the rest of the state municipalities don't have. And so pilots are a very important incentive to spur development. And as a result of our intentional efforts, where we have marketed and rebranded the city, transforming or changing the city's reputation to the investment community, that's how we've been able to attract over $1 billion in investment dollars from developers. And so we kickstarted things on South Avenue with the Quinn, where had we left it as it was, we would have collected over 30 years, just over $1 million in taxes when you take the school and the city into account. But as a result of the pilot, over that same period of time, we're going to be collecting over $13 million. Now, we have a couple of projects that are to be on the agenda for this coming Monday. And one of these projects in particular, which is on our west end and our 4th ward, the current taxes over 30 years would be $856,000 to the municipality and about maybe $300,000 to the school system. With this pilot that will be on the agenda on Monday, we would generate over that same time period $39 million. Now, when people make the argument that the school system isn't getting anything, look more broadly, more holistically at the benefits that are coming onto the city. Would you rather $800,000 or $1 million over 30 years, or would you rather $39 million? And I think the math is very simple. Pilots generate significantly more revenues to the city than would otherwise be generated had there not been a pilot. Had there not been a pilot, the projects would not get built, and there would continue to be blight in several parts of the city. And so the capacity of the Plainfield Municipal Utilities Authority, the capacity is there. There is a connection fee that the utility authority gets for every unit that is built. And so capacity is not an issue at this time. And so there are studies, there are engineers that are involved that could address those issues and give the assurance that capacity is not an issue, but economic development is a need, and we are making it happen in Plainfield with a significant economic benefit to all of our homeowners. And so I wouldn't trade $39 million for $1 million at all.
Mm-hmm. Mayor, we've experienced a real rise in homelessness through this scourge. And I was in New York a couple of weeks ago, and it was noticeable, the homelessness on the streets of New York City. And we've also received greater numbers of homelessness coming to our state from the city. And have you experienced this in Plainfield? And if so, how have you managed it, and what do you expect to do about it going forward?
Yes, homelessness is a problem, not only in Plainfield, but across the state of New Jersey and across these United States. It's a real problem that mayors and governors are struggling with. And we have our share of that problem in Plainfield. And unfortunately, a number of the homeless in Plainfield are being sent here from neighboring communities who are not shouldering their fair share of the burden of homelessness. And I think that is sad because people who are homeless, they need help, they need resources. Many of them have mental issues. And to that point, our police department, our social service agency, the state and the county all came together and tried to identify who these homeless folks are, how can we assist them. And we provided resources, to many of our homeless. And believe it or not, there are a couple of our homeless, a couple of the homeless in the city who've actually refused assistance. And there is one guy who has the means, but he chooses to, live that way. And that is sad and unfortunate. But the city of Plainfield, we are doing all that we can to provide resources to the extent that we can. During the pandemic, on an almost weekly basis, we drove around the city and we distributed care packages to our homeless residents so that they could take care of themselves. We are also purchasing a trailer, a mobile unit with showers and toilet facilities that our homeless population would be able to use. This is what we're doing at a cost of about $125,000. Additionally, right now as we are meeting, I was to be in a meeting at 1 o'clock with the YMCA of I think it's the Greater YMCA, which is based in Elizabeth, as well as with the county social services and my community development director. There's a meeting happening right now where we have this building that we have refurbished in the last 2 years for the purpose of housing homeless veterans. It's known as Dudley House. And as we speak, there's a meeting that is going on where that program is seeking to expand to also house homeless men. And so there was a grant that we got from the state to help make that possible. And we know that the state is okay with combining homeless men with our veterans at that facility. And so we're going to continue to do all that we can to address homelessness in our city, but there are resources that are needed from the state and federal levels that must be pushed down to the municipalities so that we could do more. It's a problem for Plainfield, it's a problem for this country.
Mayor, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about your unique political history and the campaign. I just want to ask you, because you've been a leader on this issue and it is unfolding before our eyes right now in Minnesota, the Derek Chauvin case, the Derek Chauvin trial, but you put together a George Floyd commission to address issues of police brutality, if I'm not mistaken. And could you tell me if you've seen any policy come out of that, any local change from that commission that you put together?
We felt in the wake of the George Floyd incident that it was important for us to put together that commission. I don't think it's good to make assumptions that things will not happen here. We are fortunate that we haven't had those incidents happening in our city. And I must say how great a job our Plainfield PD, do on a daily basis protecting and serving our city. I think we have one of the finest police departments any place that you can find. However, although I feel that way about our Plainfield PD, I also recognize the need to make sure that we have policies and procedures that are what they need to be in the wake of these many incidents that we are seeing play out on television month after month or day after day. And so we impaneled that commission of 10 residents who look deeply at the policies and procedures of the Plainfield PD. And we forwarded that report to the Attorney General, to the Governor's office, and to the prosecutor's office. And they were highly complimentary on that work product. And that work product helped to inform some of the reforms that the AG's office have put in place in the wake of the George Floyd incident. And so we are very pleased that we've been able to influence policy changes at the state level, which would be pushed down to the local municipal level. And so we should never assume or never say never that an incident of violence would not happen here, but we are grateful for the fact that our Plainfield PD has been performing at a very high level, and they're very active in the community, and they really embrace the notion of community policing, and I applaud them for how they serve our city each and every day.
Do you trust that there's the adequate political will in the legislature to pass enabling legislation for a civilian review commission, which you've called for?
The will may not be there, but like so many other things, the pressure from the public, politicians oftentimes come around to doing the right thing. Sometimes it takes a while before it's done. I do believe that a civilian complaint review board would be passed into law by the State Assembly and Senate. I testified a couple of weeks ago as to the need for such a commission, empowering local municipalities to be able to assemble these civilian complaint review boards, to have that layer of transparency and protection on both sides. Because just like when body cameras were first being introduced, there was a fear on the part of law enforcement that these body cameras would put them under the spotlight. And I recall meeting with then Union County prosecutor Grace Park when that was being introduced. And I wholeheartedly embraced the notion of introducing body cameras, because they protect the public and they protect the police officers. A civilian complaint review board is critically needed in every community because it brings that layer of transparency. We can't or we shouldn't rely solely on internal investigations. We should have a say. The public should have a say in how these cases are reviewed and ought to be able to influence outcomes when it comes to police violence, so that our communities can be better served and protected.
Mayor, I just want to point out too, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that you've been a longstanding member of the New Jersey League of Municipalities, where you've played a very important role at the outset of discussions about legislation and how they impact mayors and councils on the ground. Is that correct? You've been involved in policy making before these bills oftentimes even get into the hands of the legislators themselves.
Yes, I have been a longstanding member of the New Jersey League of Municipalities. I'm also the vice president of the New Jersey Urban Mayors, and I'm the president of the New Jersey Black Mayors Alliance for Social Justice. So we look very closely at these legislation, these, proposed pieces of legislation. We also, from time to time would draft legislation as members of the New Jersey League of Municipalities to introduce to the legislatures, to introduce or recommend for consideration by the legislature. So we have done that over the years. We continue to do it. I used to be a member of the Legislative Committee of the New Jersey League of Municipalities. I am now a member of the Finance Committee, given that that's my background as a finance professional, but I am still very actively involved in looking at the legislation that are being proposed. We had a meeting only yesterday looking at different pieces of financial legislation that are being proposed for consideration by the full legislature, both Assembly and Senate. And so I continue to work very actively in that regard. But I am also very active as Vice President of the New Jersey Urban Mayors Association in trying to shape policy. And the New Jersey Urban Mayors Association is supported on the policy side by the Watson Institute, which used to be housed at Thomas Edison University. It is now housed at Kean University. So these are the ways that we try to shape policy in the state of New Jersey.
Mayor, I'd love to get into some of that in another time. I find all that fascinating. I would like to get your thoughts in another interview, hopefully, about what we're missing in terms of urban policy right now and where we can improve. I would just like to ask a couple of final questions because I've covered you for years. It's probably been going on 13 years now. And I remember when you were one of just a handful of resistance movement underground rebels fighting to get into Union County Democratic politics. You had served as a commissioner or then freeholder, then you were on the outs and fighting to get back in. And I think the other mayors have left office by now. So in a way, you're almost the last man standing of what was once called locally the New Democrats, with your ally and friend, now Commissioner Rebecca Williams. And I just would love to get your sense of, as someone who has been on the outside, who is now on the inside with the support of the governor behind him and the support of the Union County Democratic Committee, do you feel that you have been able to be an agent of change, even now, maintaining, and how have you maintained that spirit of good government in I think a period where many lack that sense of trust that government is actually doing good? Have you maintained a sense that it can and that it is?
So I have always been a person with a level of independence that over the years, that level of independence got me into trouble because I have always been an advocate for bringing about change in a way that would impact positively on the people that we serve. And I was of the view that we were not getting from the establishment what we needed at that time, and that resources weren't being pushed down to the local municipal level in a way that they should have been. And so I was on the outside of that door, beating down that door, knocking, trying to bring about change that would be impactful on the city of Plainfield. That wasn't happening. And that is why birth was given to the New Democrats. And I was very instrumental in the birthing of that movement, which led to many confrontations between the then establishment and the New Democrats. As a result of that advocacy, and as a result of forming alliances with people who wanted the same thing, the same kinds of changes for the county and for the city of Plainfield, I have been able, in spite of many blows that I took, that actually hit me in the pocketbook and sidelined me for so many years, I never gave up hope. And I kept fighting and fighting until finally I was able to get on the inside and work hard to change policies, work hard to make sure that the needs of Plainfield were being addressed and that resources would be pushed down to our residents here in the city. And I've been able to do that rather successfully. The level of services that we have been able to get from the county during this whole COVID pandemic is as a result of the partnerships that I've established at the county level, at the and at the state level. And so I believe that what we have been fighting for so many years have now led to a level of services and resources that are flowing to Plainfield that otherwise could not have had I thrown my hands up in the air and walked away those many years ago. So things are very different. And I believe that we are getting our share of a large pie that can be split in so many different ways. I don't think we were getting our fair share those several years ago, which led me to begin this fight for empowerment and to make sure that we got our fair share.
I see little things, progressive measures that suggest your roots, like a citizens budget committee. Things like that I notice seem to bear the imprint of that early resistance movement. Mayor, what do you want to tell the voters? What do you want to remind them of in a closing statement here about why they should vote for you?
I want to let the voters know that as a result of me being entrusted with the mantle of leadership over the last 7+ years, that we have been able to transform Plainfield. We've been able to regain the reputation as being the Queen City. We have been able to attract people to the city of Plainfield to invest their dollars. We've been able to attract people from neighboring communities to come and buy the beautiful homes that we have here in our city. I want the people of Plainfield to know that this community is safe and that as a result of my leadership with the support of members of my administration, we have driven crime down, violent crime, by 50%. We have driven nonviolent crime down by 45%. We have stabilized the city's finances to the point where we have delivered 2 tax reductions in the last 2 years. We have rebuilt our infrastructure, paving roads that were not paved for over 55 years. We have made our city safe. We have transformed recreational spaces by investing over $5 million into artificial turf facilities on opposite ends of the city for the enjoyment of our young people and the community at large. We have aggressively addressed the issue of COVID-19, making our community safe. There are so many things, Max, that this administration has done that caused me to be worthy of the support and to be reelected to a 3rd and historic term. And so I have the confidence that the people of Plainfield would recognize how much this city has changed in the last 7+ years, and they would return me to office as the mayor of this city for the next 4 years. We are moving this city forward. People are coming here. The city is hot. I should mention to you that Business Insider voted Plainfield #9 of the top 25 cities across the nation where property values are growing the fastest. And so there's no need to mess with success. We are delivering for the people, my administration, and I. And so I believe that I have earned the support of the people to be reelected to a 3rd term so that the progress can continue.
Mayor, just for clarification's sake, so there's never been a mayor in Plainfield who served 3 consecutive terms. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Never.
I was looking at the history a little bit just before this interview, and I was thrilled to find that there was a mayor named Job Mail who was the first mayor, and it was his home that was the library at one time, if not now. Is that accurate?
He donated the land where the library was built. He also donated what we now call the PPAC, which used to be what's the name of the denomination? Used to be the Friends of, I don't remember the name, I'm drawing a blank, but he donated that land, the church, which has now been gifted back to the city, and it is now known as the Plainfield Performing Arts Center. And I should tell you, given that you asked about these 3 consecutive terms, that he served 3 terms.
Right, but not consecutively.
Not consecutive. He is the only one to have served 3 terms, but not consecutive terms. And so I will be the first to serve 3 consecutive terms. And Job Mayo, who was the city's first mayor, was the only one to have served at 3 different times.
Right. Sir, I look forward to continued conversations, and it's always great to see you, and it's great to see you looking well. And I want to thank you for your time today.
Well, Max, you know, it's a great pleasure. You have seen what I have done over the years. You know my struggle, and you know where I came from, where I am. And I trust that what I have shared with you today gives you some sense as to where I want to take the city in terms of continuing the progress that we have made. So I want to thank you for the opportunity as well.
Thank you, sir, and I hope to see you in person soon, Mayor.
Yes, yes, indeed. I'm fully vaccinated, Max.
I've got to get that taken care of, but hopefully soon.